October 1st, 2025. 40 minutes. That was all the time the Southern Interagency Task Force, backed by the U.S. Navy, needed to turn a $45 million smuggling stronghold into a powerless wreck drifting across the Caribbean. Time was running out. How could U.S. forces stop the target vessel before it vanished into the Caribbean Sea? Over the previous 72 hours, Southcom had tracked the smuggling ship non-stop from the moment it departed the Venezuelan coast. Using satellite intelligence and aerial surveillance, they mapped its route and identified its likely delivery point. Every movement was monitored. Every maneuver was anticipated. The target was being watched the entire time, and the intercept was only a matter of timing. At 7 a.m., somewhere in the Caribbean Sea, a P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft continued what looked like a routine mission. But on this day, its real task was to maintain covert surveillance of the suspect vessel from more than 10,000 feet above, staying out of sight while never losing visual control. At the same time, inside the headquarters of U.S. Southern Command, Southcom, a lone white dot flashed on an electronic map. The vessel was moving in a zigzag pattern, carefully avoiding commercial shipping lanes, still 72 hours from its expected drop-off point. On deck, 5 crew members moved about nervously. Below them sat a cargo of illegal goods, 1.5 tons of narcotics, and a shipment of automatic firearms, together valued at roughly $45 million on the black market. The crew believed the open ocean was their safe zone, a vast, lawless hiding place. That belief would prove to be their biggest mistake. The vessel had shut off its automatic identification system, or AIS, hoping to disappear like a ghost ship. But there was one problem. They couldn't hide from an NRO reconnaissance satellite orbiting hundreds of miles away. The satellite locked onto their position and relayed critical intelligence through a secure network directly into the tactical data chain. High above the clouds, the $200 million P-8 Poseidon, built to hunt submarines, kept circling in silence. It served as a second set of eyes, providing uninterrupted, high-detail surveillance. Flying at altitude to avoid detection, it used SAR radar to track the ship's movements and infrared sensors to pick up rising activity on deck, a sign that the crew was growing uneasy. Maybe one of them noticed a faint white streak in the sky, or maybe instinct told them something was wrong. Suddenly, the ship changed course. The U.S. response came almost instantly. From the cockpit of the P-8, the pilot reported over the radio. Target zigzagging 5 degrees. They know something's off. From the Southcom Command Center, Captain Ramirez replied, "Adjust orbit. Maintain 30,000 feet. Stay hidden." The invisible trap was tightening. On deck, the thermal signatures of the crew flared with sharper movement. Anxiety was spreading fast. They felt they were being hunted, but they still couldn't see by whom. Then, over the horizon, the destroyer USS Fitzgerald appeared, moving at over 25 knots. It wasn't there to strike first. It was there to control the sea. Keeping its distance, the Fitzgerald maneuvered in a wide, deliberate arc, guiding the smuggling vessel into a narrowing corridor of open water and cutting off any realistic escape toward land or shallow coastal routes. At 7:10 a.m., just as analysts had predicted, the target vessel surged forward, pushing its engines harder. It abandoned the zigzag pattern and moved into a straight line, conserving fuel for what the crew believed would be their best chance to break through. They attempted to send a distress call. It didn't work. The Fitzgerald had activated a low-power electronic jamming system, subtle enough to make it seem like the vessel's own radio had simply failed. The crew still didn't fully understand what was happening. They only knew one thing: they were alone. With radio contact lost, the smugglers moved to Plan B. They launched a small commercial reconnaissance drone. The goal was obvious: get eyes in the sky, locate any pursuing forces, and find an escape route through islands or shallow water. But the moment the drone lifted off, it was detected by the P-8 Poseidon far above. Sensor data streamed in real time to the Fitzgerald's command center. A tactical decision was made within seconds. Instead of destroying the drone with live fire, the commanding officer chose a cleaner solution. A specialized counter-UAS team aboard the destroyer deployed a handheld drone defender system capable of disrupting control links at a range of more than 500 meters. It fired a focused radio signal that severed the drone's connection to its operator. The control screen went dark. The drone wobbled in the air, drifted for a moment, and then dropped straight into the sea. Their last attempt to see the battlefield was over. U.S. forces pressed their advantage. The P-8 Poseidon began deploying a line of sonobuoys, compact floating acoustic devices about 5 inches in diameter and 3 feet long. Their purpose was to capture the unique sound profile of the vessel's engines in the surrounding water. Each buoy carried both a surface radio transmitter and underwater acoustic sensors, making it possible to track even subtle changes in engine output. At 7:25 a.m., with the operation now 25 minutes in, the tension escalated sharply. The distance between the USS Fitzgerald and the smuggling vessel had narrowed to just 2 nautical miles. Even after being electronically isolated, the vessel still refused to slow. The crew appeared determined to outrun the situation, convinced that $45 million was enough to disappear forever. That silence, that refusal to comply, forced the Navy to shift from pressure to visible force. Would the crew dump the cargo? Would they try a final reckless move? The order came through. Switch to armed warning phase. The P-8 Poseidon immediately broadcast a loud warning across the sky. This is the U.S. Navy. Stop your vessel immediately. Comply now. On the forward deck of the USS Fitzgerald, the remotely operated Mark 38 Mod II naval gun system, chambered in 25mm, received authorization to fire a warning shot. Through the Aegis combat system, the firing solution was calculated with absolute precision. The order was exact. Fire in front of the target's bow. Create a visible water column 50 meters ahead. A burst of 25mm rounds tore through the air. An instant later, a towering column of white water exploded directly in front of the smuggling vessel, like the ocean itself had thrown a punch. The shockwaves slammed into the hull. The vessel shuddered violently. The crew panicked, and then they made the move U.S. forces had expected all along. They started throwing the evidence overboard. Boxes of narcotics and firearms were tossed frantically into the sea as the crew scrambled to erase the trail. At the same time, the engines roared for one final push, but the vessel had already lost the initiative. Aboard the Fitzgerald, the crew's reaction was instantly analyzed. The order was to hold position and prepare for a second warning shot if necessary, but with one priority above all others: no casualties. Preserve evidence, end it cleanly. Instead of chasing, the Fitzgerald shifted to a smarter tactic. Using the Aegis system, and within just 5 minutes, the destroyer calculated the smuggling vessel's likely escape trajectory. Guided by the SPY-1D radar, it moved into a precise interception point, 1.5 nautical miles ahead of the suspect vessel's path. The 9,000-ton USS Fitzgerald became a wall of steel. Its bow turned nearly perpendicular to the smuggler's route, forming an unmistakable barrier across the water. The target vessel now had only 2 options: slow down and stop, or risk a catastrophic collision. Even then, facing an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer at close range, the smugglers still refused to give in. They pinned their hopes on the last functioning engine, searching desperately for even the smallest gap. Whether it was desperation, denial, or sheer refusal to surrender, they pushed on. But after repeated warnings by radio, signal interference, and live warning fire, the vessel officially crossed the threshold. Back at Southcom headquarters, the final order was issued: disable the engines. This was no longer a warning. This was a direct enforcement action. Once again, the ship's Aegis combat system and fire control network worked in sync. The aim was not the entire vessel, but a precise section at the stern, the area housing the engine room. There was no intention to sink the ship. The objective was simple: stop the vessel, preserve the evidence, end the chase. At that moment, a U.S. Coast Guard MH-60T Jayhawk helicopter from the Hitron Team Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron moved into position above the vessel. From the open door, a highly trained aerial gunner locked onto the smuggling boat's engine section. Armed with an M2 Browning .50 caliber system and supported by an advanced targeting setup that calculated speed, distance, and wind conditions, the gunner was able to place a controlled burst with remarkable precision. The heavy rounds cut through the air. A string of violent metallic impacts echoed across the water, followed by the tortured sound of machinery failing under extreme force. Inside the engine compartment, pistons, crankshafts, and gear systems were torn apart. Thick black smoke began pouring from the stern. Within moments, the vessel lost power. Its forward motion collapsed almost instantly, leaving it to drift only a short distance before stopping completely on the open sea. The propulsion system had been fully disabled. On deck, the crew made no move to fight back. Shocked by the sudden stop and overwhelmed by the speed of events, they stood frozen, realizing the situation was over. There were no fatalities, only ruined machinery and a vessel that could no longer run. Now came the final phase. From the USS Fitzgerald, 2 RHIB fast boats were launched, slicing across the water like black arrows. On board were U.S. Navy SEALs, trained and equipped for high-risk maritime boarding operations. Alongside them was a U.S. Coast Guard law enforcement team, ready to take control of the vessel and secure the evidence. The approach was incredibly fast. In less than a minute after reaching the target, the boarding teams carried out a clean and disciplined takeover. No shots were needed. Control was established through speed, close quarters tactics, overwhelming presence, and total command of the situation. A firm order rang out across the deck. This is the United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard. You are surrounded. Get on your knees and put your hands in the air. Once the vessel was confirmed secure and no further threat remained, the search began. It was systematic, careful, and highly professional. Drawing on experience from countless similar missions, the boarding teams quickly identified the cargo: 1.5 tons of narcotics compressed into bricks, a large cache of submachine guns, and just as importantly, encrypted documents. That discovery meant far more than one intercepted shipment. A critical link in the cartel's logistics and financial chain had just been cut. At 7:40 a.m., the 5 suspects, restrained with their hands secured behind their backs, were escorted to the RHIB for transfer to the USS Fitzgerald, where they would be held temporarily. From there, they would be transported to a U.S. facility and processed through the federal justice system. For them, the operation was over. With its engines destroyed, the vessel was judged to be beyond recovery and also a serious navigational hazard. A final order was issued: sink it on sight. A Navy EOD team carried out the task, placing and detonating charges according to procedure to ensure the vessel was fully destroyed. They remained on station until the ship disappeared beneath the surface. The target had been permanently removed. What made the mission successful was not one weapon system or one dramatic moment. It was the result of a perfectly coordinated operation, a chain in which every part performed exactly as intended. And this was about more than a single smuggling takedown. It carried wider strategic importance. The Caribbean Sea remains one of the world's most important maritime corridors, with roughly 15% of global trade passing through the region. Protecting that route is a major priority. The operation also sent a broader signal across the region. It underscored the determination of the United States after the sanctions pressure placed on Venezuela from 2024 into 2025. A period that pushed criminal organizations such as Tren de Aragua to pursue illegal funding channels even more aggressively. 3 days of tracking, 30 minutes to close the trap, a clean and decisive finish. For the criminal network, it was the day everything collapsed, a disaster unfolding in the very waters they thought gave them protection. For the U.S. Navy and its partners, it was another mission completed at sea, and another demonstration of maritime reach, coordination, and control. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.